All right, so we've got two sides of the triangle now. We have aperture, we have shutter speed, and now let's talk about the last one, which is the least understood. I think, at least when I was starting out as a photographer, I understood it the least. ISO or ISO. So let's do the first question. How are you supposed to say it? Is it ISO or ISO?
I've heard it said both ways. Some people say ISO. I've always said ISO.
Same with me. And I think what it stands for is like International Standards Organization or something like that. That's so generic that it's like, what?
Yep.
Okay, so
and I can't remember exactly what it is.
So what is ISO?
ISO, very, very simply put, is the sensitivity on your sensor. So the higher the number on your ISO, the more sensitive your sensor is to light. And so you would naturally think, I'm just going to crank that all the way up.
Yeah, let more light in.
Because we want to have our sensor be as sensitive as possible to light to get the best possible aperture and shutter speed settings. But
Makes sense
ISO is a fickle, unforgiving thing. And what I didn't realize was the higher your ISO, the more chance for digital noise in your images. So while it is part of the exposure triangle, it is the last part of that equation that you want to change. And the reason I say that is because of that digital noise. You can completely ruin an image, although AI has gotten a lot better with that part. I have one app that I use specifically for denoising photos, and it does a really, really great job of doing nothing but take the noise out.
So noise is, you usually associate noise with sound. When we're talking about an image, can you maybe be a little more specific of what noise looks like?
Sure. It's I guess it almost looks like film grain. It's in the background, and it makes your photo not look clean.
Like, I'm trying to think of analogies that Gen Z would understand. Like, I can say, well, it's like when you have the TV to a channel where there's nothing on that channel and you just see the noise, but I don't know that registers with people now. Like, what's another? Yeah.
It is hard to explain, but if you've ever taken a noisy photo, you know exactly what we're talking about, because you'll open it and it'll almost look like there's snow in the photo.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, snow, it's often, depending on the colors in the photo, it'll be like all different colors of snow that that basically make the image unusable if it's bad enough.
Yep.
And
yeah,
so,
almost like static on a TV. I mean, it's...
So let's go back to what it actually is. Okay, we're talking digital. This is digital photography. Some people may be doing film photography, and I love that for them, and I like doing it too. With film, when you buy a roll of film, you're buying a roll of film where the whole roll is the same ISO. You can't change the ISO. So you either buy like 400 ISO film or 100 ISO film or whatever, 1600 ISO film if you want to get really crazy. And so you're just stuck with that ISO for the whole shooting that whole roll of film. And then all you can really adjust is the aperture and the shutter speed. So you would have to decide back in the day with film or today with film, what you're going to be shooting and how sensitive you want the sensor to be. Then it wasn't the sensor, how sensitive you want the film to be to light.
Mm-hmm.
And you're stuck with that for the whole roll of film. So if I was going to shoot a concert in a dark club, I would buy a roll of film at as high of an ISO as possible, because I know it's going to be a low light situation. If I'm going to go shooting outside in broad daylight, I would get a low ISO, 100, 200, 400, whatever. Now on digital cameras, you can control it and change it for every picture. So you can take one picture at 100. So yeah, let's talk about those numbers a little bit. What is the range of numbers of ISO, and which is more sensitive to light and which is less?
Sure. So on a digital camera, the lower the number, the cleaner the photos is the way I like to think of it. I think on my camera, I can go all the way down to 50 ISO. And then there's arguments to be made about whether or not it's a good idea to shoot below your camera's recommended minimum ISO, which for my camera is 100. So I like to shoot at 100 ISO as often as possible because you're going to get the best results. I think my camera goes all the way up to, I don't know, 100,000 ISO, maybe.
Yes, 64,000 or 128,000, something
128,
like that, yeah.
I think is where mine goes to. But if you take a photo at 128,000 ISO, it's going to look like a snowstorm
Or an electrical storm. Yeah.
or an electrical storm, and will be pretty much unusable. I don't think I've gotten too many images aside from using a Sony A7S higher than 64,000 ISO.
6,400 or 64,000? You've used 64,000. Okay.
I have, yeah.
I set mine on I have a Sony A7 III, and on that, and I assume on most other modern cameras, you can set the, even, I'm not recommending to put things on auto. I think it's important to learn how to shoot in manual mode where you manually set all these things like Phil talked about at the beginning. But if you put ISO on auto, which I do sometimes if I'm in, let's say I'm shooting pictures at an event, which is indoors and outdoors, and it's in the evening, so it's getting darker as the light is changing all the time, so that I eliminate one thing I have to constantly be changing. I'll just put the ISO on auto and manually control shutter speed and aperture. And you can set a range on the camera that it's on auto, but you're not going to let it go above 12,800, for example. And that's, I think, what I usually block mine at when I do that.
I think that I almost, unless I'm doing tripod photography where I'm 100% in manual, if I'm shooting an event or a march or a concert, I've almost always got my camera in auto ISO with a range set.
Yeah. Yep. And so when you're learning how the camera works, I think there's a value in using manual mode and not setting your ISO on auto so that you can actually learn these things well. But then there'll certainly be applications where, like Phil was just talking about and like I talked about, you can make your life a lot easier by just putting the ISO in auto mode within a range and manually controlling shutter speed and aperture. Okay, so ISO is how sensitive the sensor in your camera, or if you're shooting film, how sensitive the film is to the light that is let into the camera. And we've talked about some real world situations where, in general, I think you said you want to shoot with the lowest ISO possible because that'll give you the cleanest image. I think that's the most important takeaway. Keep the ISO as low as you possibly can. You'll have a much better image and much more to work with after you've shot the image when you put it into Lightroom or whatever you're using to edit the image. That said, modern digital cameras do allow you to shoot at much higher ISO without paying much of a price in terms of noise, especially when you get it into Lightroom or Capture One or whatever software you're using, where you can correct for some of that noise. Say again, so generally you keep it as low as possible. What's the range you try to keep it in, like that you wouldn't go above to get a usable image?
32 or 64,000. Probably not even 64,000 because it gets pretty bad at that point.
Yeah. My rule of thumb is like, I will let it get higher, but in general, if I can keep it below 3,200, then I know I won't have to adjust anything for noise after I take the picture when I get it into Lightroom. If it's between 100 and 3,200, that's going to be, with a modern camera with a full frame sensor, that's going to be a usable image without having to adjust the noise afterwards. So if you're looking for a rule of thumb to not let it go above a certain amount, that's my personal recommendation. Keep it below 3,200. If you can go above 3,200, but then you're going to have to do some editing afterwards to get rid of some noise.
I would say 3,200 if you're trying to keep it all in camera, and probably 6,400 if you're going to be adjusting it in Lightroom after the fact.
We are in agreement.
Especially, and this would be for the majority of the kinds of photography that people are going to be doing. Where I talk about shooting at much higher ISO is basically shooting in pitch dark on a tripod in a abandoned building or something, where like literally the only way you're going to get the photo is to shoot it at a super high ISO.
Right.
And then fix it in Lightroom.
All right. So we've talked about the three sides of the exposure triangle: aperture, shutter speed, ISO. We talked about some sort of recommended guidelines for when you would want to use different types of settings. But let's say you're taking some photos. You have a model in front of you who is on a timeline, can't sit there all day while you're fiddling with settings. It can be you're at an event, you've been paid to take photos in an event, and there's the most important moment and you have to capture that moment. It can be hard and intimidating thinking about adjusting three settings to get everything right. And so I guess I'll just take a step back and say another caveat for this is what we're talking about here is what you can do with just your camera without adding light from whether it's a flash or external lights of some sort, and generally without a tripod. There are times when you can use a tripod and it'll allow you to do more, like slow down the shutter speed significantly in a way that if you do it handheld, you're not going to be able to hold it still. You're going to get some blur. But so all of what we're talking about is without adding light yourself to get a better shot. But saying that, like, now you're in a moment where you need to take a picture. You have to figure out these three things together. So let's walk through what that looks like.
Okay. So the conditions that I'm going to use are nominal photography conditions. You know, you're in a room that's well lit. You're outside in a field with your friend and you want to take a couple of portraits. So in nominal conditions, you're going to have your ISO set at 100 because you want to have the least digital noise and the cleanest image you can get to your sensor. And so that leaves you with your aperture and your shutter speed. If you have good natural light and you're taking a portrait, you should be able to take that portrait at, f2.8 or 5.6, depending on what you're trying to do, and have that blown out background. And you should be able to do that because you have nominal light and you'll be able to set that shutter speed wherever you want to. You know, you could set it at 1/10,000th of a second. You could set it at 1,000th of a second without overexposing. So the beauty of the exposure triangle is that depending on what you're shooting, you can adjust these three settings to achieve the results that you want to get more often than not. So say it's a landscape photo and it's a cloudy day or it's twilight, you're going to want to have that aperture be f11 so everything in the photo is in focus. But at that point, you're probably not going to be able to stop motion. So if there's somebody in that photo, you might have to sacrifice that f11 and open your lens up and shoot it at f6 to be able to get a fast enough shutter speed to stop motion. And that's the whole thing about shutter speed and aperture is it's a compromise. There's
creative trade-offs. Yeah.
There's creative trade-offs for all of it. And it depends on what you're trying to achieve.